What we would like to talk about now is where we are going to get our inspiration for our quilting designs and how to practice free motion quilting before we even get to our sewing machine. I have created a Pinterest board called Machine Quilting Inspiration, and on that Pinterest board I have been pinning inspiration that I've found across the web that for machine quilting, different designs and different ideas that are really helpful. So if you want to follow that Pinterest board, you will see that I will be adding machine quilting ideas to that board over time to help you kind of get the creativity flowing. Some other really great resources for continuous line quilting designs are a few books. The first one that I have that I find super helpful is Free Motion Quilting with Angela Walters, and this book is incredibly helpful. She has 28 designs and they're step by step, so it actually will show you the design and how to actually quilt it and draw it. And that is really helpful to just practice on paper. And she has some basics of free motion quilting as well in her book, and I find this a very, very, very helpful resource. Another pretty cool book is Doodle Quilting, and this is fun because she has a bunch of different line drawings that are continuous line to give you ideas, and then you can practice tracing them to get that muscle memory. You can also find inspiration from non-quilting books. This is a book I had before I even started quilting called Zentangle Untangled. And if you look, these are basically just pencil drawings, and they would make beautiful quilting. So you can find inspirations from all around you. You could find it on a Kleenex box everywhere you go. So I encourage you to take with you as you go a small sketchbook and pencil, so that if you see something that is inspiring, that could be a great quilting design, to go ahead and jot it down when you're out and about. It's also really important to have a sketchbook to practice these designs. You are going to want to sit down and just practice your stipple by drawing. Draw it, draw it, draw it. The more you draw it, you will build muscle memory, and you will teach your mind how to think ahead, so that when you are getting into tight spots and you're not sure where to go next, you'll know what to do. The most important thing with free motion quilting is to gain muscle memory and to think ahead. So we're going to train our minds and our muscles by practicing with paper and pencil. So what I've asked you guys to do is to print off your sound wave block, just the outline. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually play with quilting designs in the blocks by drawing them, and you can print as many as you want, and you can draw it as many times as you feel you need to help build confidence in your quilting before we even sit down at the sewing machine. So this is my sound wave block, and I tried to keep the designs to a minimum as we're beginning, since a lot of you, this is the first time even quilting these designs or even seeing them. So what we're going to be using on the sound wave block is, in the colors, we're going to alternate from a wave design to a wavy organic straight line design. And then in our background, we're going to do a tight basic stipple. And I've had these here as well. Here's the wave. And the wave, the very important thing about quilting designs is they can be done multiple ways. So if you use the stipple, you can make the stipple look totally different based on how big you actually make it. So the scale. So you could have a really, really large stipple, and then you could have a really small stipple, and that's going to totally change the design. You could also have a wider wave, and then a really tight wave, and a really, really tight wave, and that's going to change the design. And so you have freedom to play with these. Since we're working with smaller blocks and smaller piecing, most likely your designs are going to be a lot tighter and a lot smaller. The tighter you make your quilting, the more dense it is, and the more thread it's going to take. And the quilt overall is going to have a different feel after you're completely finished than if you're using really open, wider, less dense quilting. So that's a decision that you'll need to make. So let's learn these designs. Let's first talk about the basic stipple. So the basic stipple is kind of, I think it looks like coral. Coral that you would find in the ocean. That's the first thing that I think of when I look at a stipple is coral. And what the number one rule with stipple is that it's a meandering stitch and no two lines cross each other. You don't want to cross over each other when you're quilting it. And you want to try and keep your direction moving constantly. So try and only use stipple in two directions at a time. That's going to make more sense when you actually start stippling it. So when you are working with quilting designs, you always want to remember that these are going to be continuous designs. You don't want to have to stop and start a lot. Every time you stop and start, and what I mean that is break the thread or clip the thread or stop the thread. You're going to stop and start your speed and things like that, and that's totally fine. But when you actually have to stop and cut your thread and then start over in a different place, that I'm going to call that breaking your thread and stopping. And you want to minimize that as much as possible. So that's why we use continuous line designs, so that you can keep going and without having to stop. So with a stipple, we're going to start over here. Just practice starting in one corner and trying not to pick your pencil up as much as you possibly can. Your hand might get tired, you might have to rotate. So that's understandable, but just try and keep your pencil down as much as you can. With the stipple, you can work in rows. So I'm going to make a little line here just to show you. That's an imaginary line, let's just say. And we can actually work in rows when we're stippling, so that we don't get stuck somewhere and not really sure where to go next. So I'm going to do like a medium-sized stipple here. And just remember, this is a meandering line. And you just want to kind of relax. Don't think too hard about it. You want to pay attention so that you don't cross over any of your lines. But don't think too hard so that you stress out about, oh, what am I going to do next? That's what practicing is about. That's what we're doing right now. Doing this on paper is going to help you build that muscle memory so that you can do it. So see how I took that corner, and now I'm just coming down my next invisible row. And you may have step C right here where I've got that pointy. That's kind of a little bit of a mess up, and that's okay. You're probably going to run into that when you're actually quilting, where you move too quickly or you don't make your curve round enough, and that you're probably going to have that happen. That's okay. You'll get better at that as you go. So we're just going to want to keep going. Yep. And see how see right there? This is why we practice. I'm not perfect at this either. So here we go. This is an example of where we crossed over a line. So right here, I'm going to erase this. Now, we wouldn't be able to erase this on our quilting, but that's okay. It would be fine if you left it. You don't want to pick it out. Your quilting is not going to be perfect. This is handmade. This is free motion quilting. Do not stress if you mess up. This is supposed to be a learning experience, and it's not supposed to be perfect. If we wanted perfect, then you would get a pentagram and you would have a computer do it for you. So that's where you don't want to cross lines like that. You don't want to cross lines. When you're stippling, you want to try and avoid crossing lines. And I'm running out of lead here, but this is the basic stipple. You just keep going in a meandering effect without crossing lines, and doing them in rows if possible so that you don't get stuck.